Athletor Podcast, back again. Matt Valenti, Coach Matt Valenti now. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, boy, do I got some questions for you, sir, because, in a week that it has been, let's say, um, manipulated by or dominated by the recent retirement of John W. Smith, some
Mm-hmm.
things getting swept under the rug, and that's Matt Valenti's coming back to coaching. How the heck did this happen, brother?
Oh, that's a great question. Great question. A lot of time, a lot of thinking, a lot of soul searching, and an opportunity that just was too hard to pass up.
You seemed, and forgive me if I'm wrong, seemed very happy in your administrative role
Mm-hmm.
at Penn.
Yeah,
Can we just,
absolutely was.
can we talk about number one, how you got into that role, and then why you are now coming down with the dregs of society in wrestling coaching?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and certainly it's one I've thought a ton about. So, how did I get into administration? Well, last time I was coaching, way back in 2014, 2015, I was here at Penn. And post 2012 Olympic cycle, I actually went back to school, restarted a master's actually at Drexel. I started at Columbia, finished it up at Drexel. As I was finishing my master's, our then deputy athletic director here at Penn, wonderful lady by the name of Alana Shanahan, asked me to help out part time with some administrative work. And so we'd been through a bunch of coaching changes. I wasn't sure where I was with coaching at that point in time. I was like, sure, I'll help out. Let me see what I can do. Spent a year and a half ish doing part time administrative work for Penn's administration here, working for Alana. And then after our 2015 wrestling season, she came to me and said, hey, listen, we're hiring a bunch of jobs here. We need somebody to focus on this specific skill set. You willing to jump on board and help us out? And I was on the fence of what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure where I was coaching wise. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll hop in. So back in 2015, I moved over to administration full time. Took on a full time job over the next 9 years or so. I basically held 6 different jobs in administration here at Penn. Oversaw at some point in time 17 of our 33 sports that we have here at Penn. Oversaw 5 different areas within the athletic department, and most recently was a senior associate athletic director. So I was at like the number 2-ish level in administration here at Penn, and had a great opportunity to learn about all kinds of stuff administratively, what goes into a college athletic department. Ironically, Alana, who hired me into the role, left and went to Johns Hopkins to become the AD a year or two after I started working the administration. She came back 2 years ago and is now our athletic director back here at Penn. So a little bit of a full circle moment for her. Got to work for her for the last 2 years, and then, then we started this little carousel.
Yeah. So who comes to you? Did Roger come to you? Did Coach Reyna just come to you go, listen, we're not leaving this up to chance ever, ever, ever again? Is that something like that?
Um, Ish. I'm going to go with ish on that
Fair
one.
enough.
So most recently in my administrative job, I oversaw 7 sports here at Penn. I had women's field hockey, men and women's swimming and diving, heavyweight men's, lightweight men's, and women's rowing. And then I oversaw wrestling. And working with Roger, we have known, Roger's no spring chicken. We knew he's had an incredible career. We also knew that like the time was probably coming where Roger would think about retirement. And so for the past 2 years, I've been working with Roger and our AD and talking about what does the future look like? How do we explore this? How do we do this the right way? What is, in the world of college athletics, you guys are seeing it right now, right? Coaching transitions are rarely smooth. And I think that's being generous. And as somebody who's hired and fired coaches in his career, I've lived through a bunch of those too, right? And it is hard to bring in somebody new and expect things to just continue on the trajectory that they were on. There's inevitably going to be some sort of bump or some sort of hurdle or some sort of major hiccup. Some coaches find their way through it, others don't, but like it's the end of the day, who pays for it the most is student athletes, right? It's the wrestlers,
Sure.
the guys on the teams who like pay for these transitions where things don't go well. Fortunately, unfortunately, here at Penn, we experienced that quite a bit too. We've been through a number of coaches since Roger's first stint here at Penn. So it's something that we spent a lot of time thinking about. And I sat in rooms with Roger and Alana and some of our alums, and we started kind of really thinking seriously about what does the future of the program look like. And a couple of people asked me probably 18 months ago now if I would ever consider it. And at that point in time, I was like, nope, leave me alone. Nope, not considering it. And I
Nope, I
think
got enough
over
salt and pepper in
time,
my beard. No thanks.
yep, I was like, over time, I was like, you know what? Why? Why do I keep saying no to this? Why do I keep saying no? And I was like, here's the bottom line. I'm a wrestling guy. I'm a wrestling guy through and through. I'm a wrestler, love the sport, and I love this program. And ultimately, it came down to, is this an opportunity that I can pass up? And I think I finally landed at like, why would I? Why would I pass this up? So here we are today.
That's wonderful. No, and I really truly mean that. Now, I have so many questions, and to be completely honest, I'm excited for you on the head coaching endeavor, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm more curious about the administrative role only because it's fairly unique for
Mm-hmm.
someone to have wrestled at such a high level, to have coached at such a high level, and then to have moved for the most part up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how, so number one, my first question in that regard is how did you, being as competitive as you are as a human being, how did you scratch that itch as a administrator? Or did
Mm-hmm.
you?
I did in ways. I did
Mm,
in ways. And I think that's part of what went into my thinking of coming back. But to the administrative side of it, I mean, part of my job here at Penn and part of what I did in my previous role was I was the main liaison to our Office of Admissions and Office of Financial Aid. That was a big part of my job of what I've done over the last 9 years. What that essentially means is I have been advocating for every single incoming student athlete that's come to Penn over the last 9 years with both our Office of Admissions and our Office of Financial Aid. So like I can go through every single one of our 900 student athletes here at Penn, and I know them all by name. I know every single one. I know how they did in high school. I know how many spots every team gets here at Penn. I know how that all works. And I was the guy who was picking fights with admissions to make sure we're trying to be as competitive as possible as an administration, as an athletic department here at Penn. So like that was a big part of my role. That scratched a lot of the itch for me, was that
okay.
I was picking those fights. There weren't a ton of them, but picking those fights with admissions to help our teams have success. And through the years, I've gotten close to a lot of our head coaches here at Penn because their success ultimately here at Penn is
Wrote
dependent
on
on
wrote on who they could get in, and that
exactly.
laid on your shoulders. Oh, wow.
Yep. So talk
Interesting.
about scratching a competitive itch. When I see teams winning Ivy League titles, national titles, having individual national champions, those were kids that I advocated for to help those programs out. So that to some degree scratched the itch.
That's pretty dope. Yeah, because that's a that's a that's a sword that we as athletes and as coaches we don't get to talk about a lot because I think a lot of coaches are afraid to get into administration because they feel as though they're not going to be able to quell that thirst of competitive nature in their lives. Um, all right, so then the next question that I have about the administrative side of things is, can you as an administrator do more good for a program than as a head coach?
I put it at different good. There's
Okay.
different ways. So one of the real driving factors for me of coming back to coaching was I had been in a position where I could have an impact on our student athletes, and I could have an impact on 1,000 of our student athletes, which on the surface is really cool. But my impact that I was having was always indirect. I was always, and not always, but as of late in my former role, I was at a level where I had teams of people underneath me, right? I had, at one point in time, I had 13 direct reports. And then total, like underneath my org chart, there were like 38 total people that like worked within my little shop, if you will. All of those people were having a positive impact on student athletes in some way, shape, or form. So much of that was under my leadership and guidance to help that all happen. And I facilitate a lot of that and build out a lot of the structure and a lot of the vision and a lot of the plans for that. But ultimately, the day to day of like impacting a student athlete and
Hands
helping
on.
impact it, I wasn't hands on. And that was something where like I could have a pretty large global impact, which was awesome. But for me, as a former coach, I wanted the hands on, both literally and figuratively, hands on impact on student athletes of like, you know what, I can actually in real time help somebody out and how they grow as a wrestler, as a person, as a student, versus like, I'm going to set this global tone of like, here's everything that we're going to try and do to help better your experience top to bottom.
I'm curious how your 50,000-foot view of the athletic department kind of shapes your view now that you're going to be a head coach and in charge of just one part of it.
Yeah, it's a great question. So to some degree, I'm probably one of the most dangerous coaches in the department because I know a lot.
I know what you guys are doing, and you're full of shit.
I know how this place works, but at the same time, I've also seen incredibly successful coaches here at Penn specifically, and what it took for them to be successful, right? And I've also seen failed coaches, and I've seen coaches who have struggled to find success at a place like this. And I'm in a position now where my 50,000-foot view allows me to understand, like, okay, if I want to be successful in this role, here are the people that I need to be getting on my side. Here are the people I need to be taking care of to help out our program. Here's how I want our program to approach the athletic department and the administration in general to make sure that, you know, we are a team that people are excited to work with, that think positively of, you know, when something does go sideways, they're like, oh, those guys are great guys. Like, here's everything they've done for our athletic department. You know, they've been good citizens. They've been good partners. We're going to go out of our way to help them a little bit. So a little bit different perspective to think about, like, okay, if I want to be a coach that people want to work with, which is, if you want to be successful at this level, you got to have people who want to work with you. I have a bit of a inside view into what that looks like.
Yeah. How would you go about telling, and I'm sure that the answer you're about to give will vary slightly from institution to institution, but how would you go about, we just got off a podcast with Neil Erzman down in Little Rock. So they're starting a program, right? Like I mean, Penn wrestling has been around for centuries. So it's like it's a slightly different dynamic in that regard. But how would you go about telling new or young coaches to get the administration on your side?
Start with gear. That's a good starting point.
Just give a t-shirt.
Hey, listen. People think the administrative side is full of glory and writing a desk and it's boring and check in and out 9 to 5. Having lived on that side, a lot of those people bust their butts for not a lot of money just because they like what they do. And you'd be surprised how far a t-shirt will go.
That's fair.
So a little swag goes a long way. Just saying.
I love it. I love it. That's an easy, but you know what? That's an easy fix that a head coach has very much control over.
Yeah.
Very much. You have an expendable budget for marketing, and here is a good chunk of t-shirts. Here you go, admin.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I joke a little bit. It's like a 20% joke. It's an 80% seriousness. But like, the people who are going to most impact your program are the people you need to feel good about your program, right? And as a young coach going in, if you're going into your new job and you're thinking about, all right, like I want to do X, Y, or Z, well, who are the people you need to help you do X, Y, or Z? And you got to think about how you get those people on your side. And you got to spend the time of understanding who they are and like things that we sometimes forget about and coaches forget about in particular. Like there's some words you can say to people in administration from time to time that they really appreciate, like thank you or please, right? And that's not lost because there are a lot of demanding coaches out there right now. If you look around the world of college athletics, Like the number of times a coach will walk into an administrator's office and be like, I want, we're missing, you're not giving. And like, that's how questions and statements start. And a little bit of like, thanks for all you're doing. Really appreciate the time you put in. Would you be willing? Can you help us? And like letting people know that they have a stake in the program in a way where they're appreciated for what they do. Like that actually matters. It really matters, particularly in the world of college athletics right now, which I mean, it doesn't take much to see how bonkers the world of college athletics is at the moment. Like being an administrator right now in this chaos is craziness. It's like total craziness. You just have no
10
idea
times
what
harder
tomorrow's
than
going
it
to.
was 20 years ago. 10 times
100%.
harder.
100%. We never know what the rules are going to be tomorrow, right? On any given day, we don't know what the rules are we're trying to operate within are going to be tomorrow. There could be a new court case that goes through. There could be a new NCAA rule set that comes out. There could be a new conference being proposed. Like there's all kinds of craziness that's happening. And we haven't even scratched the surface of NIL and what that world looks like. So like understanding that, yes, your program has challenges and things that you're facing, but that you also need these people to be on your side to help you. And gathering that team around the team, it really matters.
How do you
It'll help you move the
convey?
needle faster.
Oh, I'm sorry. How do you convey that to the athletes? Like that seems like these are, and forgive me if I'm crazy because they might not have as much interaction with the admin as the coaching staff does, but it seems like those are very attainable, very simple things that athletes can do as well. Like, hey, just go say, hey, appreciate what y'all are doing and thanks for the support that you give us.
Yeah.
Is that something is that a conversation that you're willing or are looking forward to having with your athletes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, I'm fortunate to be in this role because the program that Roger and Brian have built here through the years, like these guys inherently do that. They're recruiting guys who understand that. That's part of who they are. Being on the administrative side, like the guys would come into my office to talk to my staff and would make sure they came by to say hi and like would be saying thank you and be very gracious to my staff that I worked with. And the guy and our administration would sing their praises. Like, sure, we'd have our problems, we'd have our headaches, and like we'd come up with some funky things where staff would come in my office and be like, what the heck is like, what is wrong? Why is this kid trying to do this? And while they would be questioning what is happening, they're like, but he's been so nice about how he's trying to go about it. And I appreciate that he's not just demanding that I meet with him in this moment and that, he's trying to be as respectful as possible. And I'm like, okay, good. That's helpful. And people are more willing to help when they know you're going to be gracious back to them.
Let's go back to that roundtable discussion with the administrator or the athletic director and Coach Reyna 18 months ago. When the conclusion was come to that Coach Reyna is nearing the end of his career and the prospect of another head coach was on the horizon. Did it have to be an alum?
No, absolutely not. Yeah. And honestly, I was actively canvassing the entire country looking for who would be a potential good fit.
Why then? Because it's not just Penn, right?
Mm-mm.
There's not a chance that somebody that wasn't a Hawkeye is taking over the Hawkeye program.
Mm-mm.
Now, it's just then there's almost no chance that somebody that wasn't
I
a
wouldn't
Cowboy.
say no chance. I wouldn't say no chance.
Okay. Almost.
But I understand where you're coming from.
So that said, is that first of all, it's an obvious trend, but why is it a trend? Let's start there.
I think it's a trend in part because very few people know institutions like alums will know institutions. And very few people will know programs like alums will know the program. Longtime assistant coaches, sure. Yes, absolutely. But if you haven't lived the experience, sometimes it's hard to relay what the experience is of being that student athlete at that school, right? So being a student athlete at Penn is a unique experience. It's different than even our Ivy peers. And it's obviously very different than being a Hawkeye or being a Nittany Lion, right?
Sure.
So there is a nuanced view of what it means to be a student athlete at a school like this and to be a successful student athlete at a school like this. Now, does that preclude somebody from outside being able to do the job well? No, but I think it makes it a little bit more of an uphill battle to understand how you operate and how you relate to those student athletes and get and draw the most out of them. So I think you see a bit of a trend of the alumni side of things, in part because I think some of the programs in particular that are changing over right now have some prominent alums who, are available.
Could
And I think
step in.
availability is a
Yeah,
piece of the puzzle
sure.
for sure.
Mhm.
Right. But, it sometimes is easier for administrators to look at an alum than it is to look at somebody from the outside who's got no idea what that place is about.
Are there any drawbacks to narrowing the field like that? I'm not saying that
Yeah.
you did, but
Mm-hmm.
what type of drawbacks do you think certain institutions could fall into by just looking at alum?
Yeah, I think it's easy to fall in the trap of thinking just because they're an alum, they're going to maintain the way things are or know how to elevate a program, right? Just because you're in it doesn't necessarily mean you know how to do that. And quite honestly, sometimes it can be the opposite, right? They just were stuck with the way things have been done and don't want to change it, right? And for a program that may not be performing at a high level, like that means you may just perpetuate that level that they're at. So I think as an administrator, I'm putting on my former administrator hat, like you have to be very careful in thinking about if you're going to go down this path of exploring an alum, are they going to bring in fresh ideas? Are they going to do things the exact same way? Or are they willing to understand that like you're going to have to adapt, you're going to have to grow, you're going to have to evolve because our world is changing all the time. And in college athletics, if you're staying status quo, like you're going to struggle. The old school coach, right? Like we all joke about old school coaching. Somebody says old school coaching, that's like a red flag. You're like, yeah, okay, thanks for your time. See you. Hope you have a good day. Right. So like you have to understand that there are evolutions to how these things go and that, you can't stay static. You can't just assume things are going to stay the same and you have to have a plan for how you adjust.
9 years ago, when you left coaching, the college sports world was a very different world.
Mm-hmm.
What has been your biggest trepidation or fear stepping back into a coaching role in 2024-25?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, it's the same thing I've been concerned about for the last 9 years. I guess it's not even 9. It's probably closer to 6 at this point. But when the recruiting timelines moved earlier, being in the role I was in administratively, I was concerned about the kids that we were trying to bring forward of we're recruiting kids in their junior year of high school and how much do they know about what they want 2 years down the line? And how do you set this up in a way where they, one, maintain that interest for 2 years, but two, their expectation of what they thought they wanted 2 years ago still aligns with what they want when they come in. And making sure that the experience that you're trying to put in front of them once they actually are on campus is the same as what you sold 2 years prior. That's a tough thing. And especially in the world of college athletics and college
Bro, I
coaches.
didn't even think about that. I
Yep.
didn't even think about
Yeah.
that. So does
Coaches
that
come and go these days.
change? Yeah, but does that, oh, I'm sorry. I got to dig a
No, it's
little
all
bit
good.
there. Does that change when you start recruiting a kid?
No, you can't. I mean, you still have
Oh,
to start.
that's
You
even
got,
worse.
oh
That's
yeah, you got to
even...
be in the mix. June 15th, right around the corner. We're actively talking about what we want to do and how we're going to go about it and, who we're going to target. And we have to do that because if you're not in there on the front end, one, the kid just assumes you're not interested, right? If you're late to the game, then, what are you doing? And two, like the best guys are going to be off the board quickly, right? So you got a very, very narrow window to figure out one, do I want this kid? Two,
Yeah.
does this kid want us? And three, is this the right kid for us? And not necessarily in that order. But like some of these junior or I guess rising juniors in June will commit on day one. And I'm like, do you know what your favorite color is yet? Right. But that's also part of the process. And it's a 2-year recruitment process now is what it is.
So how then do you, as a recruiter, and I might be asking a question of you right now that could change in a month, 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How are you going to identify red flags in a kid early on so that you can move your attention towards someone else?
very rarely do those flags come up in conversations with the kids, because they have to be pretty blatant for those flags to come up with the kids. You got to start by understanding what's around them and who's around them, right? So I think for me, it's about getting to know high school coaches, getting to know club coaches, getting to understand the people who are advising them in their lives, whatever that is, right? And kind of trying to figure out what the right questions are to sniff out anything that, could be of concern, right? And like, it's a concern and it's a flag, but like as you get into a recruiting process with a sophomore in high school as a rising junior, how do we suss out that kid might be HEW by the time he gets to campus, right? 2 years from now, what does that look like? What is the trajectory this kid is on from a burnout standpoint? Like, is this kid going to hit campus and be like, I'm so sick of wrestling, I'm done, like I don't want to do this anymore? Like, how do you sniff that out? And then you get to the bigger things of like character issues, and not that wrestling has any of those, but characters that are going to cause problems on your program, right? Cultural fit matters. And for us, a lot of it is, we get to know the community around the kids, but also we lean on our current student athletes when we host visits of like, tell us what you think. And we got to trust our guys that we bring in, that they believe in the culture that we're building, they believe in who we are, and that when they talk to these recruits, they can sniff out like, this kid fits, this kid doesn't. And we have to be comfortable sometimes with like, this could be the number one recruit in the country, and our team's like, this kid sucks, we don't want him. And that means that kid may not be the right fit for us.
Yeah, no, that's probably the best way to suss things through is let the kids deal with it, right? Because they'll be honest about it. All right. So then what would you look for as a major green flag? What is a major go? Like, okay, not this kid might be finishing fourth in major tournaments. However, he's got this, and this, and that's why we're really gung-ho on a kid.
Yeah, I think wrestling specifically, I mean, you got to be able to see upside. You got to be able to see upside athletically, technically, coachability wise, right? Like if a kid is fixed in how they're wrestling and they're not willing to adjust or change, like, your ceiling is only going to be so high. So ceiling is a big piece of the conversation of what we're looking at when we're recruiting kids, for sure. But then we got to dig into the character piece, right? Like you got to understand about how they interact with their teammates. How do they respond when they lose? Like I've spent more time in the last 2 weeks now watching losses of potential recruits to see how kids respond in those losses, because I learn way more from that than I do from them pinning 5 guys in a minute, right?
Sure,
and like, sure. Or, teching a top 10 guy in the country. Cool. Great. But like, what happens when, you take a shot to the mouth and, you're on your heels and you got to react and dig deep? Like, can you do it? Or are you going to put your head down and roll over in those big moments? So, understanding what those types of things look like. It's the things off the mat a little bit too. Like, I talked to a recruit the other day and he was just getting out of practice that he organized with his high school team, even though he graduated. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's what I'm talking about. Like, you already graduated high school, but you're organizing workouts for your own team. Like, that's the type of kid that I want to be working with. That's the kid we want a part of our program, who's going to push his friends and his teammates to get better. So like trying to find some of those intangible pieces that really stand out that make you say, okay, this kid has it in a different way. He's not just a world beater on the mat, but like he's going to raise the level across the board from a wrestling standpoint, but also from a character, from a culture, from an academic standpoint, like not afraid to step up and push the pace across the board.
Yeah.
How do you, one of the things we talk about is the importance of culture, across, every program and every coach that we talk to. That's such a central aspect to how they recruit kids. How has it been for you taking over a program, and maybe there's some parts of the culture that you want to change, or maybe there's some parts that you don't? How do you kind of build your own culture while also having, a transition period there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the simplest answer is it's not my culture. It's our team's culture. And so as much as I may want it to look one way, our team drives what our culture is, and our team engages in and builds that culture from the bottom up, right? I don't just get to walk in the door and be like, all right, and now we are going to do X, Y, and Z, and here's what our team's going to be. Like, that's not how this works. So anything that we build here is a collective effort. It's a collective effort between myself and the team, my coaching staff and I, my coaching staff, the team and I, our support staff around the team, right? Like I want our guys to go down to the weight room and understand when they go down to the weight room, they approach it the same way they approach the wrestling room. And our strength coach needs to be comfortable with that. And hopefully he has a say in what that looks like too. So culture building is not one person's view of how that goes. It's the collective kind of vision of what do we all want this to be and how do we build it into what we want to do. Now, can I guide that and help direct that in ways? 100%, and fully intend to do that. But like, do I get to come in and make a wholesale change? Like, no. And honestly, that sets us all up for failure too. So that wouldn't make any sense. So it's a little bit of making sure that everybody understands they have a stake in what that means and what that looks like. And that they have a right to change that at some point in time too, and make adjustments as well. Like I don't expect it to be static at all times.
Right. For the next foreseeable amount of years that you're going to be coaching, that's not going to stay the exact same, and nor should it. That said, though, it seems like the transitional period was a major influence on the decision to stay in-house with a new head coach. How big of a piece of the pie would you say that was in the decision-making process?
I mean, for me, it was a huge piece.
Yeah.
In part one, because been out of coaching specifically for a while and allowing me the time to get my feet underneath me and kind of understand the landscape of where we are as a program and what the landscape of wrestling is a little more in depth, I think is important. And that helps me kind of understand where we are. But then it also allows me and coach and our coaching staff the time to really think about, okay, if we want to shift the direction a bit, how do we do that thoughtfully? How do we do that the right way so that when I do step into that role and I am the person in that role, like it's not this sudden change of like, all right, guys, technically we're changing X, Y, and Z, and culturally we're changing X, Y, and Z, and practice times are going to change, and lifts are going to, like, we're not going to do this dramatic shift where all of a sudden what the guys have gotten used to doing that have gotten them where they are today, which is a pretty high level, we suddenly are just flipping on its head and we're like, all right, and get in or get out. Like we're just going to kind of work our way through this to set us up so that it is seamless. And that hopefully, you know, it's something that our team and our guys and our program and the people around us will be excited about too. And honestly, I want it to be as smooth and as seamless and as exciting as it possibly can.
What new rule changes are you excited most about? Good God. Did you compete? You competed in the ball dryer, didn't you? Good
funny.
Lord.
Was in our PRTC workout this morning, and the guys were actually asking me about that. And they're like, you competed for 2012. What were the rules like? How did we handle like
it was the dark
clinches?
ages. Like we try not to talk about them.
Yeah. We deserve to get dropped from the Olympics in 2012 because of those rules. We deserved it.
Don't blame it. Don't blame it.
They were awful.
Terrible. Couldn't watch it. Couldn't understand it. Couldn't explain it. It was terrible. I 100% agree. So what rule changes are you most, and freestyle is just the glaring instance in my mind. And obviously the trials are coming up this weekend. But what rule changes are you most excited for in even college wrestling next couple of years?
It's a great question. It's kind of a funny question because my biggest connection to the sport over the last, I guess, 6 years now, I was on the rules committee for 4 years. I was the chair of the rules committee for 2. I was actually on the rules committee with John Smith when we did neutral danger. And at some point here, when things settle down with John, I'm going to post video of John and Tim Shields on the floor of the NCAA headquarters on the rug doing neutral danger zone together. Because I have that video on my phone.
Yes, that's amazing. I would give a pinky. Oh.
But I'm on the championship committee now, and the rules committee reports out to the championship committee. So when they went through all these major changes last year, they had to present all of these to all the committees, like D1, D2, D3 championship committees. And they're like, yeah, here are all the changes we're putting forward. And I was like, 1, you guys are nuts. That is a lot of changes in 1 year, but good for you. And 2,
good on you.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? We got to grow the sport. And, if that means we got to make some significant changes to do that, so be it. I'm excited about 3-point takedown. I think that's fun. I think, sitting on the NCAA committee, we track on some data over the course of the tournament. And one of the fun things that we saw, Thursday of the NCAA tournament in 2023,
Thursday?
In 2023 at the NCAA championships, there were 9 tech falls the entire tournament. Thursday of the NCAA tournament in 2024, there were 39.
Seems like an increase.
Slight increase. Now, there might have been only 2 or 3 more after that. Now, on the surface, you're like, oh my God, scoring is inflated. It's out of control. At the same time, I'm like, people want to watch points. People want to watch scoring. And tech falls, like, that's great. It's awesome. More majors, more tech falls, sign me up for that. So I think that's probably the biggest rule change that I'm excited about at this point.
Well, okay. So if people want to watch scoring and they want to watch action, what do they not want to watch, and how do we affect that?
Ooh, so this is my bias coming through on this one.
That's fine. Bias is the reason we have podcasts.
People don't want to watch people who suck on bottom, lay on bottom. Notice what I said there. Everybody always picks on the top guy. They're just hanging on, in my opinion, because we got a bunch of guys who can't get off bottom and they stink on bottom. And they just lay there. Because at this level, with how strong guys are, how advanced they are, it is so hard to turn somebody in this sport if they're just going to base out or lay on bottom. It just doesn't matter how good you are on top. Like, if somebody's just going to base out and not try and do anything, like, it's so hard to score. So hard to score points. So I do think we need to figure out how we change that. Because watching top and bottom wrestling where the bottom guy's not really trying to do anything and it's waiting for the top guy to get hit for stalling because he's not turning them, like, that's boring. That's not fun to watch. And like riding time right now that exists, I think it doesn't really move the needle for anybody. Sure, it has an impact in matches. But like 1 point and a 3-point takedown error doesn't really matter. To me, I think they really wanted to shake things up, give them a point for every minute of riding time. Nobody's going to lay on bottom anymore.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. That's one way.
You're just going to sit on bottom, then all right. Every minute you're down there,
keep on racking up points. Sure.
Yeah. Let's change the match.
How? Go ahead, Joel.
I think it's funny how all the new rule changes just changes how you do math. Because normally you'd think like, 6-point lead, 7-point lead, like, oh, this match is over. It's like the middle of the third period, and now it's like, a takedown, and all of a sudden we're right back in this match. I thought we were, going to win this one easy. So I found that to be really interesting. As this year has played out.
Totally agree.
Let me ask you this though, because I don't think we've ever had somebody, Joel, on this podcast that was on the rules committee. Coleman was on there for a minute. Branch, did we ever have Branch on? I know Branch was on the committee for a minute.
Yeah, he was. Okay, he was the chair when I got on.
Yep. Yeah, but we've never had him on the podcast. So maybe we'll do that. But where are we at with the step out rule? Is this ever going to happen?
See, the funny thing with the step out rule, I think public opinion is more in favor of the step out rule than coaches are in favor of the step out rule. Because we floated it. When I was on the rules committee, we put it out there. We were like, do we start to explore this? And we floated it on the survey of like, coaches, would you be interested? And like 20% of coaches said they'd be interested in it when they replied. And, being on the committee when 80% of your constituent base is like, no, we're not interested. Like, you don't really force a rule down somebody's throat when 80% are not on board with it. So,
Joel, would you say that is indicative of our data? I don't think so, right? I think most of the coaches, now they could be full of shit when they're on the podcast, because, and the reason I say that is because it seems to me, from let's just call it a fan's perspective, that it does take some of the ambiguity out of stalling, right?
I think we get that a lot more from the actual athletes as opposed to the coaches.
Okay. That's fair. Yeah. Do you think it would help though, Matt?
I don't know. Honestly, I've gone back and forth. When I got on the committee, I was team push out. I was like, no, we got to go push out. This edge of the mat stalling thing is just like hard to understand. It's hard to watch. I don't know when somebody's going to get hit or not.
Hard to call.
And then we started digging into it, and I was like, you know what? I can understand why we are where we are right now. And part of it is, and one of the biggest data points that really jumped out to me was this edge of the mat stalling situation, what it's actually done is reduce total match time because it's forced more action to stay on the mat and there's less stoppages, right? So if you think about the NCAA tournament and you think about that first round, right, it averages about 3.5 hours. If you went to a push out, you probably add about a minute for every single match that you wrestle because of stoppages, because you have to stop and reset, right? Stop and restart. And so when you do that, all of a sudden that tournament that we all love is even longer than what we thought it was. And matches ended up going from like, I think they were averaging at that point when I was on the committee, somewhere around like 7 minutes and 45 seconds for a 7-minute match, right? It goes from a 7:45 average to like a 9:50 average. Like, you know, you're adding almost 2 minutes per match just because you need to stop for every out of bounds step out.
So
I'm
you're
like,
saying, so, and where did they, so you're saying that freestyle matches take longer per minute of actual wrestling time than really?
Yeah. And freestyle is probably not even a great comparison because they have all the like passivity warning stoppages, and the finger warning stoppages, and like, to me, I actually struggle with freestyle a little bit right now just because of how frequently the matches are stopped and disrupted.
I agree with
and
that.
Like,
that's fair.
The number of times I see a guy like taking a shot and they stop it just to warn him for a passivity call, and I'm like,
he just shot.
He was like in the midst of shooting when he blew the
you
whistle.
literally stopped action to tell him to be more active. Like, what do we?
Yeah.
100% agree with that.
So
but
like,
I
think that impacts it a little bit. Now, could the step out be helpful? I don't know that it wouldn't be. I just am not 100% sold on it. I'm not opposed. I'm not sold. I don't know.
Yeah.
I struggle with it a bit.
I'm all for a step out as long as we get rid of stalling, then. We have to get rid of stalling. It's too gray of an area.
I think that gets hard though, because what if you get somebody who's just good at circling in, right? They get to the edge of the mat, they circle back in.
That's the sport, right? Like, I don't like. So I also look at it from a media perspective. I want those guys. I want those guys that learn to play the game. I can turn him into a bad guy, right? Like, if I'm going to tell a story, I can take that guy and make him a heel because he doesn't want to engage. But that's here nor there. I think it would do a ton for, if we're going to sell this to people that didn't grow up doing this. It is very easy to say he puts his whole foot over the line. That's 1 point. You know.
Yeah. I can see it.
How close do you think we are to somewhat of a finalized version of rules? It seems like this year was a big change, right? 3-point takedowns, multiple, I think for the past couple of years, near fall points have been changing. And those seem like dramatic changes that changed the strategy of the sport. We talk about the ball drop era and how, the sport has changed since then, but it seems like over the last few years on an international level that the rule changes and tweaks are pretty minor, right? Do you think that there's more wholesale changes coming to how the sport's going to be scored?
No, I don't think. I think there are more changes coming. I think there will always be changes. And honestly, I believe that we should be constantly tweaking and adjusting the rules. Now,
sure.
Should we have another year where we change a 3-point takedown and near falls and everything under the sun at one time? I don't know that I foresee that coming anytime soon. We intentionally, when I was on the committee, tried not to do that. We tried to limit the number of major changes we made at any given time. But that's going to be at the kind of the whim of the rules committee and who's on that committee at any given time. So, I do think, I think changes will continue to happen. I think they'll keep coming. I don't think we'll get the same like major swath of changes that we just got, but I think we need to constantly be adjusting and refining, in part because our athletes keep getting better, right? Some of the things that we used to be able to do, they've figured out the game, right? They know how to adjust. I mean, Mike, you said it, like you like the guy who's the heel who can get to the edge of the mat and then circle back and doesn't want to engage. Well, like, guys figure out the rules. Guys figured out scrambling years ago when I was on the rules committee, where guys could lay on their back when somebody was in on the shot, not give up a takedown because they scrambled and just laid on their back for 35 seconds. And we were like, that's not really what the sport is about. Like, we don't want guys just laying on their back to avoid a takedown and like not get punished for it. That's where neutral danger zone came from. So like the rules committee is going to have to perpetually adjust to keep up with the athletes and the way the sport is done. I would hope that we don't do too many major changes. We also can only do it every other year, so that helps. I think the 3-point takedown was setting the table for the step out anyway, so I think that's probably on the horizon at some point.
Cool. All right, let's get to some quick questions here, brother. What is the best wrestling shoe of all time?
Ooh, great question. So I'm an ASICS guy. I've always been an ASICS guy. I probably shouldn't say that because we're a Nike school, but oh well, I'm an ASICS guy. I have fat feet and Nikes are narrow. Which ASICS? I probably go the Rulons. I lived in the Rulons. I loved them.
Say the colorway.
What did I have? I had all the colors though. I don't know that I could have picked one.
Okay. All right, because we have heard black and yellow so often.
Probably would have. I didn't want to jump on the black and yellow train specifically, but I probably would have had to say black and yellow.
They were pretty dope.
They were sweet.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Has to be American. Only get 4. Who's on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
Folk style and freestyle.
Any style. Yeah.
All styles. Kale's number 1. No question asked. I'm going to go Jersey Roots and go with Bruce. He's on there.
Right. Okay.
Whoever wins 74 this weekend.
It's hard to argue. It's hard to argue even with O'Toole and Carr out. I don't give a shit. Yep. That's an incredible field.
And then after that.
So either Dake or Burroughs. Okay, fair enough.
And honestly, they both have a good argument. That's the hard part. I can see both of them on there.
All right, but if you have to narrow it down to 174.
I mean, I'm sitting in the room where he trains every day. I got to go with JB.
I didn't say.
By the way, he looks freaking awesome right now. I'm just gonna put it out there. He looks good. So JB.
Okay.
And then I gotta go with the old guy that just retired. John.
W.
Gotta go, John.
Yeah, that's it's almost inevitable. He has made just about every Rushmore that we have heard from. He's an innovator for sure. Okay. You have a magic wand and you can change one thing about the sport of wrestling. What is it?
It's one thing, but also the sentiment around it. I want to get rid of the singlet.
Yeah. Amen. Like, just get rid of it altogether. Here's the problem. The problem is it has become this bizarre rite of passage type of thing that, like, culturally, the cool kids wear them. And so the cool kids want to wear them.
Yep.
And if we just outlawed it, like, just, hey, enough, stop it. Shorts and a t-shirt. Everybody's cool with that, right? Cool. All right. Because we're allowed to wear that stuff, but we just don't. Yeah, I 100% agree. There's so many positive things that would come from that.
Totally agree.
You know what else is annoying about that? 2-piece singlets cost like 150 to 200% of what it costs to get a regular singlet.
Really?
Yeah. Like the shorts alone are like $100.
Yeah, they're crazy. The fight shorts specifically.
Yeah.
Spandex, you could probably, not quite as expensive, but then you're basically doing the same thing.
Yeah. We could do better with that though. I mean, that's just the demand would go up and then the price would go down. So hopefully that would not be too bad.
Yeah, 1B would be killing the headgear, but I lost that battle. I tried.
So ridiculous. It was up there. It was up there for a minute, for a couple months.
Yep.
It was up there. Every time I look at it, I'm like, who are we protecting? What are we doing?
It came back to the medical community calls cauliflower ear. Sorry, I'm trying not to laugh at this one. A permanent disfiguration.
Yeah, well, okay.
I was like, okay. I mean, yes, sure. It's not permanent. If you want to, you can fix it. It's an option. But also when, I get my teeth knocked out, that's also permanent. And you don't force me to wear a mouth guard. So you don't get to pick and choose your disfigurations. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I have heard that there is a very small contingent of people that we are just waiting to pass through this mortal coil.
I'll neither confirm nor deny that.
Fair enough. Okay. Got it. Good. Matt Valenti, you rule. Thank you so much for coming on, brother. I really, truly appreciate it. How can people get a hold of the next Penn coach?
Email's up on the website. Cell phone number might be up there too. Just come hunt me down. Social media, I'm out there. MP Valenti 07. Hunt me down. Not on TikTok yet. I suppose I need to do that, but I'll get myself on there.
I'm sure. Good luck with that. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate the time.
Welcome to the Athletor Podcast. What do you want to know with the top guest? Mike now with the project. What you want to know, man? What you want to know? Welcome to the Athletor Podcast. What do you want to know with the top guest? Mike now with the project. What you want to know, man? Welcome to the show.